then it's a bit early actually, more than 1:30, but I would like to start this GGR Talk Session with very special guest today, the Honorable Rahm Emanuel, the U.S. Ambassador to Japan. And before starting the session, we have the VIP from the university side today. So we would like to have President Nakano giving the opening remark, please.
Your Excellency, the Honorable Rahm Emanuel, the Ambassador of the United States of America to Japan, colleagues, students, and all gathered here for the special talk session in this hall. On behalf of Hitotsubashi University, I'd like to extend a few words of welcome. The Honorable Rahm Emanuel is one of the leading statesmen and women of the United States who has made such a great contribution with a vivid and strong impression on us as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, White House Chief of Staff under President Obama, and Mayor of Chicago. It is a great honor and pleasure for us to have Mr. Ambassador here today. And what makes me even more delighted is that the Ambassador is here specifically to engage in dialogue with the young people who will lead the future of Japan and the world. Looking back, international youth exchanges between the two countries, such as the US-Japan Student Conference that began in the 1930s, the Fulbright and the American Field Service Youth Exchange Program after World War II, and the current Tomodachi Initiative since 2011 have contributed greatly to developing US-Japan relations in the 20th and 21st centuries as a cornerstone of peace in the Asia-Pacific region and the world. Since arrival in Japan, Mr. Ambassador, you have traveled extensively to engage in exchanges with a wide range of young people in Japan. Your Excellency's efforts are truly a testament to this history of US-Japan exchanges as a basis of next generation's peace and prosperity. Hitotsubashi University, which started out in 1875 as Japan's first school for education and research in commerce and business, has developed over its nearly 150-year history as a university of the highest standards in a wide range of social sciences, and has produced many top business leaders contributing to Japan's ascent to one of the great economic powers. Our school has also produced many excellent diplomats working for Japan, as well as the international organizations such as the United Nations. Among them are the ambassadors to many countries, including the United States, and a couple of female women diplomats who now serve as Assistant Secretary Generals at the United Nations. I'm pretty sure the students and graduate students of Japan and of many other countries gathered here today in this hall will no doubt grow up to become future leaders of our increasingly interdependent global society, not only in Japan, but around the world. Before the start of discussion, please allow me to mention the only one name among our senior alumni, Masayoshi Ohira, who served as Prime Minister of Japan from 1978 to 1980 until his death. Unfortunately, Ohira fell ill, and his tenure was short, but he left behind a number of excellent policy proposals for the future of Japan. One such proposal was the Pacific Rim Solidarity Initiative. Pacific Rim Solidarity Initiative, which Hitotsubashi University professors at the time were deeply involved in drafting. The initiative aimed to build international relations for free and open regional cooperation in which the Japan-US relationship is to play the pivotal role, and became one of the key policy ideas that prepared the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, in the 1990s. Today's topic, free and open Indo-Pacific, the concept for building peaceful and secure international relations in this greater region in the 21st century, is in this way a very extension of the Pacific Rim Solidarity Initiative and APEC, which is one of the reasons why holding today's discussion here is so important and relevant for us all. Once again, I'd like to thank the Honorable Rahm Emanuel, Mr. Ambassador, for coming to Hitotsubashi University. And I hope you enjoy today's discussion with the students, as well as the autumn leaves on Hitotsubashi campus and University Avenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Nakano. Let me have a seat here. And today, we are really honored to have Ambassador Emanuel in here. As President Nakano has already talked about, he has served 3 terms as a congressman in the House, and he was a chief of staff in the Obama's White House, 2 terms Chicago mayor before coming to Japan as the ambassador in March 2022, I believe. And he's an extraordinary professional. You will learn a lot from him. He has very sharp insights with which to lead people, mobilize people, and he has such a devotion in professional positions. And he's so energetic and extends people's network all over Japan all the time. And we have a lot of things that we want to ask you today, the ambassador. And so maybe we will spend about 10 minutes or so between us. I will ask some questions to you, and then after that we will open this to the floor. And so first question from me is today's topic is free and open Indo-Pacific and U.S.-Japan relations. So I want to ask you about this freeness and freedom and openness aspect. And what kind of strategy the American administration has. It seems to me that into the second year in the administration, the aspect of freedom and openness has somewhat weakened. Looking at, for example, the president's visit to Saudi Arabia, or the absence of position of the coordinator for democracy and human rights in the NSC after Shanti Kalatio left earlier this year. So I was wondering what kind of strategy the Biden administration has on it.
Well, I slightly disagree that it slipped backwards. First of all, I'm coming here 2 weeks after the United States held an election in which you would have thought 2 years ago, on the heels of January 6th, would have been a troubled process. And in fact, our political norms took hold and were fortified and strengthened, and our political institutions did as well. And I say that by way of, we not only had national elections that were accepted, most importantly, they were accepted by those that lost. Now, as a former mayor and as a former congressman, as I have my bow, we have a tradition in America where the loser calls, congratulates the winner, says you're going to work together. President Biden, the president, called Kevin McCarthy, the incoming speaker, congratulated him. That doesn't mean partisanship ended, but they said they'll work together. When Speaker Pelosi, who I happened to talk to on the way here, she stepped down, Senator McConnell, the minority leader, the Republican side on the other side, congratulated her on a great tenure. Those are small little gestures, but they tell you actually, as a democratic system, it is strengthened. And when I said in this speech earlier at the press club this morning, I had all the ambassadors for the African nations over at the House about 3 weeks ago. And one of them said, you know, we need the American democracy to succeed because that's our benchmark. And in the last 2 years, a lot of people are being held accountable. We've had elections that have been accepted by the results, a peaceful transfer of power. We not only had the national elections, you had the vote in Kansas on abortion. You had a year ago, you had the governors of New Jersey and Virginia election, and all of it ran smoothly. And not just in the United States. Brazil, Israel, France, Italy, Sweden, Denmark. And you remember 2 years ago, the leaders of China and Russia all said democracy's best days are behind it. The future belongs to autocracies. Today you had free elections accepted by the publics as a whole, and the kids of Tehran are being shot at by their government. The kids of Hong Kong are on boats fleeing. 1 million Russian youth have left Moscow and St. Petersburg, not counting what's happened not only in Hong Kong but Shanghai. Now you tell me if people are fleeing those cities, why those are the future, and if people are voting, participating, and not just voting, record high participation. So I would say the democratic norms are not only holding, and for the idea of freedom to hold, you need a democratic system in which people can hold the elected officials, those that are in power, accountable. So no, I don't agree with the premise, number one. And number two, just because the president went to meet with Saudi Arabia doesn't mean America doesn't stand up. A Pew poll just I think about 2 months ago, of the populations in 17 countries. Almost 80% of the populations in 17 different countries all said that they think America will do the right thing for world affairs. Only 17% thought that was true of Xi and China. Now, what defines right thing is a debatable point, but it wasn't a negative. It was an affirmative. So I think that tells you that while we don't, we have this phrase in America, you don't spike the ball, it's a football term, on the 20-yard line. We're strong, getting stronger, fortified. It's a never-ending race. America has good days and bad days. Sometimes it slides backwards, but it's always moving forward. And so I happen to think, since freedom somewhat depends on democracy to be functioning, I think the last 2 years have been very healthy.
Okay, thank you. Well, I myself was really...
That was my gentle way of saying you're wrong.
I know. Yeah, I was indeed really happy to see that, those candidates, election candidates in the midterm elections in the United States, accepted their losing when they lost. And so I could really sense that democracy in the country is functioning and vibrant. And at the same time, for us Japanese, what we are more interested is American foreign policy, not only domestic aspect. And
maybe yes, but like the African ambassador said, and part of our foreign policy is projecting both at home and abroad. And for this ambassador, he said, we need your success for our own benchmark for us to succeed. And I don't mean to cut you off, but I would also say, I think that America stands tall when it's helping Ukraine fight a war that they never asked for. That's in direct violation of the UN Charter that Russia signed onto. When it speaks up on behalf of the kids in Iran who are trying to have a different political system and their own government is trying to kill them. Not scare them, not jail them, kill them. So I think that our foreign policy reflects our values and our interests, and part of a successful democratic election actually doesn't just stay within the boundaries of America. It ripples across.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy to see American devotion for the war in Ukraine and for the sake of human rights, for the people's dignity and so forth. And when it comes to the FOIP, Free and Open Indo-Pacific, what we are caring about is the well-beings and dignity and freedom of the people in the Indo-Pacific and mostly Asian regions. And I wonder what kind of strategy the U.S. has, especially when we, not only the United States, but actually the Japanese government has been using this term of FOIP a lot. And just as you said, when you try to promote this kind of values, you have to really show that you care, you commit to this value of freedom, openness, and dignity and human rights and so forth. And yet, what the Japanese government has been saying so far seems to me that it's more sort of banner than actual support for democracy and human rights. And so I was wondering what kind of strategy the U.S., maybe together with Japan, has for the sake of actual commitment to the values.
Slightly the difference between government and academia. Advocating and pushing is not a linear line. Since baseball's a national pastime for both countries, you don't swing at every pitch, but you do make sure you get on base every time you're up. And what I mean by that is part of the projection into a free and open Indo-Pacific has a national security component, has a defense component, has a political component, a cultural component, and a public diplomacy component, an economic component. And it's to all the peoples of the region. I think actually if you look at the United States and Japan and China, actually Japan stands tallest in the region based on public surveys. The United States right behind it, and then China way down below. Now, each country in the region has different challenges and different opportunities. We just came off of 2 weeks in which you had, or the last 4 weeks, you had all the heads of state of the ASEANs to the White House. The president was in the region at Cambodia. He then went on to Bali to the G20. And then the vice president attended in the Philippines APEC on behalf of the president because he had a family event. That's participating in not only a free and Indo-Pacific, but also in the importance of the Indo-Pacific region to America's own security interests. And where Brunei is, Burma is not the same place where Vietnam is, the Philippines are, and you take every country where it is. I do think when it came to the March 3rd resolution on Russia's war in the United Nations and condemnation of Russia actions, 8 out of the 10 ASEAN countries all voted to condemn Russia. 4 of the 8 sponsored the resolution. And so one of those is Cambodia. You could say one thing about their domestic human rights, but on the other hand, speaking up not only against Russia for their violation of the UN Charter, they have now, with Japan, sent landmine experts to deal with clearing landmines. It unfortunately Cambodia has an expertise in that. So I think that on a number of different areas, the United States and Japan are seen and aspired to by the publics to be the kind of guardians of that free and Indo-Pacific, and particularly as a counterweight to China that doesn't take other countries' interests into consideration.
Yeah, right. And also, as you yourself mentioned, the stance of the government and academia are, well, pretty much different. And also,
Very different. We don't have tenure.
Right, right. Yeah, that's a difference indeed. Yeah. Also, if we look at the government and also civil society, they are also pretty different as well. And when we think about FOIP as well, not only value commitment, but also as foreign policy and strategy in the region, I think there is a vast sort of audience behind us who are in the civil society actually trying to really support this FOIP vision in order to expand freedom and openness in the entire Asian region, not only in those democratic countries like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, Philippines, and India, but also in those authoritarian countries in China, in Vietnam, Brunei, Cambodia, what have you. And so, I kind of wonder what kind of mobilization would be possible to sort of mobilize support from the civil society as well for the vision of FOIP.
First and foremost, one of the crux issues is making sure that no country violates another country militarily. Now, in that region, I don't mean to do this, but there's been one country that basically to their neighbors has been always in one conflict or another, and that's China. We just saw it on the border with India. We saw it on the islands off of the Philippines. So part of a free and open Pacific, the main part of that is, or the crux of it, is that nobody tries to change the status quo using military force. And the United States and Japan are a counterweight to China. Nobody else has the capacity to be that, but the alliance and the bilateral relationship with the U.S.-Japan. And at the crux of that idea is that you don't change any part of the status quo through military force.
Right. Do you have any thoughts about those civil society activists as well?
100 thoughts, but look, I think one of the best things that we can do is create a space for voices that want to see in their own countries democratic changes, and do it in a way that promotes not only those freedoms and human rights, but also making changes in those governments. Now, having been sitting around with a president, etc., it's never just one thing. So you have to always balance it out against every other equity, try to enshrine your values with your economic interests, with your national security goals. And so let's step back over the span of time of the last 40, 50 years. Korea is now, take Korea. It was not always a democratic system. It took time to nurture forward a democratic system there. It's true Taiwan. They were never that. Now the Philippines in the last year had an election. That wasn't true 20 years ago. So it's not, again, going back to my first thing, it's not a linear line. And part of the civil society engagement, it's part of the cultural engagement, is making sure you project a certain values and a certain esteem for a certain set of values of freedom, respect for the law, and respect for the individual.
Thank you very much. Well, if I may, can we open the questions to the floor? Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure that a lot of students have questions. So, if you have questions, please raise your hand. And when you are called upon, our assistants are going to bring our microphone to you. So please say your name, your affiliation before making questions.
And not everybody has to. Obviously, you don't have to speak English. Just we'll figure out the translation for me.
Right. But I think most of us actually speak English. Yeah. So, who has questions? Okay, then Monitani-kun first, and then Nin.
Thank you very much, Ichihara Sensei, and thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for this fantastic opportunity. My name is Yuki Moritani. I am a PhD student here at the Graduate School of Law at the Hitotsubashi University. And actually, I have quick 3 questions. One is related to the Indo-Pacific. And I think a few months ago, you mentioned about the U.S. Japan alliance that it's not the alliance protection anymore. It has to be the alliance projection. And I think that should be really important. But as a Japanese citizen, I kind of have a doubt how Japan can contribute to the alliance projection, especially with the projection with the level of the United States deserves to be. So how do you think about this, and what would you require for the Japanese government to do for the alliance projection? That's my first question. And the second question is, as a young academia, I was kind of interested. I won't be a politician, but I'm kind of interested in your career as a politician. How do you find the difference of being the mayor for Chicago and being the ambassador for Japan? How do you think is the difference? And actually related to this, I have my final question. What kind of the role the cities or the local government has in the international affairs of diplomacy? Because like in recent years through the COVID, like through the news, as international affairs, we see a lot of mayors coming out, and I feel it has a global impact. How do you see is the role, and how significant are those? Thank you.
Let me try to do this in reverse, okay? I don't recommend reading my book, but if you wanted to, I wrote, when I was done being mayor, I wrote a book called The City Nation. I happen to think being a mayor today, this kind of changed over 10, 15 years ago. Mayors are the closest government to where people live, work, and play. You know, where your school, you know, at least in the States, I can't speak to Japan, but you know, what schools your kids go to, what park happens in your neighborhood, what improvements in the library occur. That's not a national government issue. So it's closer and more intimate to your life. Second, I'm working with 2 different mayors right now. Like the mayor of Tokyo made a decision on benefits for partners, for the LGBTQ community. I'm going to do something soon with the mayor of Nagoya. Just an observation, it's not a commentary. The idea that you're going to pass national legislation here in Japan at the national level, not going to happen. At the local level, it's going to happen. Climate change, local level, it's going to happen. When I was mayor, the mayor Ann Hidalgo and I were very interested. She was opening up the Seine River to the city. I had changed the river projectile for the city of Chicago. We held an international conference. The mayor of Milan came, she came, the mayor of Mexico City, Haifa, Cape Town, mayor of Gothenburg in Sweden, just, you know, Dallas. We had 24 mayors from 5 continents. We didn't ask the State Department. We didn't ask the Commerce Department. We just did it. So mayors today can make things happen in a way and have a greater sense of where a city is going and how people live, work, and play. And they can do things on international issues with a speed that the challenges require. That's 1. 2, I'll answer your second question about mayor and U.S. ambassador. I'll give you this one anecdote. So you know I take trains. I don't think that comes as a surprise anymore. I took a train my whole life. When I was mayor, twice a week I would take a train to work from my home downtown to the city hall. When I said I was going to take a train here, the entire State Department and security, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I said, yeah, I can. They go, no. It's a security. I said, security? Trust me, if I had a security problem, it would have been in Chicago, not in Tokyo. Okay? And I said, here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to get on the train, and you're going to figure out the security. I'm not going to listen to you. Now, I never saw the idea of taking a train in Japan becoming such a part of kind of public diplomacy and engagement. It was, Japan has great trains. I like taking trains. I'll take a train. Plus, I find it more efficient if I'm going to go to Kyoto, taking the train. But I had to fight the State Department, and I had to fight him periodically. But I took the train. Now it's become part of the profile, and the State Department is using it to tell other ambassadors how to interact with the public. Now, do I think being mayor was the thing that taught me that? No, because I like training. But back in my profile in the city of Chicago, Time Magazine has done like a cover story, etc. It was done in front of a train station because I made it part of my, I modernized Chicago's public transportation system a lot more than other mayors. The New York Times not only took note, but they wrote a major full what New York can learn from Chicago. So part of those skill sets you get from having run for office, being in office, and getting politics. Now, a lot of people think, including this row right here, diplomacy is very serious, double-breasted suit. It's politics. You know, one of our great Secretary of States was Jim Baker. He was not a foreign policy expert. He was an expert in power, how to use it, how to deploy it, and when to reserve it. And if you know politics and you know people, you're going to do real well in quote-unquote diplomacy of foreign policy. And, you know, when I worked for President Clinton, he gave me this piece of advice. He says, if you want to work with somebody professionally, get to know them personally first. So one anecdote, two anecdotes. When I was mayor, I get elected in February, I get sworn in May. The city council's 50 people. I met with every one of them individually. Tell me about your family. Why did you run for office? 8 years running, very complicated. I never lost one vote. Came close once, but never lost a vote. So when I came here, this is not diplomacy. Before I met with the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, the Defense Minister, the head of METI, down the line, I did research about their background. Like I found out your Prime Minister played baseball, was a second baseman. So I got the Chicago Cubs to put his name up in the mantle, in electric lights, and I got him Kishida 100 because he was 100th Prime Minister, and I got him the Chicago Cubs and Chicago White Sox jerseys. Buddy Guy is a very famous Chicago blues singer, one of the old-time famous, came up from the Mississippi and Louisiana, from the Delta. Your foreign minister plays guitar, is in a band. So I got him a guitar strap signed by Buddy Guy. And he told Tony Blinken, our Secretary of State, who also plays music, showed it to him, and Tony got angry. He said, jokingly, how come I don't get something like that? But if you know something about everybody personally, when you have to go work with them professionally, you know, and you got to be a person of your word. And so learning in politics, not just being mayor, is important to being able to be a diplomat and represent your country and advance your interests. To the first question about, look, I do think the last 40 years was about alliance protection. We're involved, the United States and Japan, in a major, not just us, the world is involved in a major restructuring and transformation. Economically, post-COVID, post-Russia's unwarranted war, post-China's coercion, the world is not snapping back to 1999. Not happening. What we need together is projecting into the Indo-Pacific a set of values, a set of interests, and Japan is in the middle, good, of making changes so it's a full partner in that projection. I mentioned earlier, 8 out of 10 of the ASEAN voted for condemning Russia at the United Nations on the March 3rd vote. You know who got 8 out of those 10? Japan. Your foreign minister got on the phone with the foreign ministers of all 10 ASEAN, and the United States was doubtful. And it was Japan who secured. No other region was as strong in the condemnation. That wasn't true in Latin America, wasn't true in Africa, wasn't true in Central America, as the ASEAN countries. 8 out of 10, that's 80%. Just to prove that I can also do math, but that's 80%. That was Japan. And America, we were a little jaundiced that it could be done, and Japan did it. That's what I mean by alliance projection of about a certain set of values and interests.
Thank you very much. Name, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Ichihara Sensei, for making happen this event today. So I'm Nin. Full name is Nin Tatao. I'm from Myanmar. So my question is not directly related to this today's topic about not about U.S. and Japan, but I want to ask about two questions. The first question is Thailand. Thailand is already member of Biden's Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. So I'm wondering if Biden or let's say U.S. government, if they have how can I say, they are in the role to encourage Thailand to accept illegal people, and in order not to oppress Burmese illegal people in Thailand. So cause of the current crisis situation in Myanmar. So that is my first question. And the second question is how U.S. control the situation of Russia is benefiting from Myanmar. So Myanmar is kind of in the circle of Indo-Pacific Indo-Pacific how can I say environment. So that's my second question. And so let me add one more question about as an ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Japan, so I want to know your perspective about the accepting refugee to Japan. So Japan government and also current these days Japan government is accepting refugee from different countries but Myanmar, I don't see any more Myanmar people and more Myanmar students as a refugee, but except Hitotsubashi. Hitotsubashi is accepting me. So do you have any a perspective as an U.S. ambassador to encourage other countries Korea, Japan, and also other countries as including Thailand in order to accept refugee and also the scholars from Myanmar? They are in such a difficult times. Thank you.
I got to be honest, this is very rare for me, but I'm not qualified to answer. I very rarely say I'm not qualified. So as it relates, I think your questions are encouraging Thailand to take a bigger role in the human rights. Is that a fair way to summarize? Well, I think the best way I can answer that, and again, this is not, I want to be clear, but part of our roles is not to step out of our lane. But I think that the United States is treaty allies with Thailand. Two, being more engaged with Thailand, both on the political side, economic side, strategic side. So it has not only the independence, but the fortitude to stand up for what's right. But I feel bad because you have obviously cared deeply about these questions. I'm not really an expert in U.S. Thailand or U.S. Thailand and making sure that it does the right thing for some of the other peoples of the region and their human rights. Okay? So I just want to be fair to you and honest with you. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Kimijima-kun. And if you can limit your questions to just one, because I see some other hands as well.
Question to one, I'll give you 3 answers.
So anyway, so thank you. Okay, I'll do my best. So thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador and Ichihara Sensei. So I'm so excited that today's session. So my name is Yuto Kimijima and a student of master's degree. So I have one question about that thing. So I would like to know that the effect of Russo-Ukrainian war for alliance politics, especially in the aspect of credibility of commitment. So a few people say that Ukrainian war has the effect for the credibility of commitment among allies. So Ukraine is not ally, yes, actually, but the president want to prevent the escalation of war and so prevent the direct intervention
yes, as a young man, young Japanese, I think that a few people feel the risk of abandonment from the United States. So my question is, in conclusion, any effect will occur or not in the United States alliance policy, especially in Japan and any other official or unofficial allies? That's all.
So I can only sit so long, so I apologize. Is that okay? Okay. Well, it better be okay because I'm going to get up. So I want to summarize it so I'm answering the question you asked. That Ukraine's not an ally, the United States is stepping up, but what does it mean to allies and to non-allies? Is that a fair summary of the question? Okay. Not just because I work for him, but I think President Biden has done a really great job here, which is if you didn't stand by Ukraine now, I don't think Ukraine would be the last military conflict by Russia. But how do you both get engaged with confronting Russia, with Ukraine as a sidekick to Ukraine, but doing it in a way where the war doesn't continue on or spill over? Now, my own take is Russia's lost the war. There's no way Russia can win this war. Don't know how it ends, but that's a separate question. First of all, one of the reasons for fighting the war was the President Putin said was the expansion of NATO. Since he invaded, Sweden and Finland joined NATO. So if your idea was not the expansion of NATO was a problem, you really kind of backfired. Two, Russia said that they're a superpower and they want to be treated like a superpower. I don't know of a single superpower that's dependent on North Korea and Iran for their weapons. That's not a superpower. That's a codependency. Three, he wanted to basically intimidate the rest of Europe to its dependency on its energy. And all of Europe now has spent the last year, pretty successfully actually, and heroically, separating themselves from Russia. The Russian economy has shrunk by 5% last year, and it's about to shrink another 4% going forward. Nobody would ever want to buy another weapon from Russia. If you do, I would ask your money back when you look at what's happening. And I think the president has done a heroic job of keeping the western part of Europe united, not letting the war spill over, confined to Ukraine, Russia, but giving Ukraine the resources they need to defend their sovereignty. Now think about it. Russia, both militarily, economically, population-wise, is 10 times the size of Ukraine, and in 9 months, they've lost Kiev, they lost Kharkov, and they lost Kherson. It's not exactly a performance you want to replicate. And I think that the president has done, as I said earlier, a really good job in making sure this is the last type of war where somebody makes a war choice in violation of the United Nations. Now, Ukraine is different than Japan. Japan is a treaty ally we are committed to, in Article 9, of defending the integrity and freedom and independence of Japan, and we will be good to our word on that. Ukraine is not that, and yet Ukraine has been a recipient of close to almost $25 to $30 billion worth of weapons, political support in the United Nations, and regular intelligence briefings and information to do what they need to do for their own freedom. So that's what you can draw from that. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I thought Gary's hand.
I'll answer the question even with a Carolina jersey on.
That's fine. Hello, thank you, Ichihara Sensei and Mr. Ambassador. I have a question that really relates to today's topic, free and open Indo-Pacific. So in 2019, there is a protest in Hong Kong, right? And and actually I view as the protest, the movement itself is failed. Will you see that this kind of movement is a failure of democracy and a backward of democracy? And how will United States and Japan fight against China's aggression with possible military annexing Taiwan in future? Like how would you possibly deal with this kind of ambition by China? Yeah, that's my question.
Well, actually, the one part of your question that I forgot, and it's relevant. I think the Prime Minister and the President have done a really good job also. At least in the American perspective, it was like the transatlantic is over here, the Indo-Pacific is over here. And I think they've made the world realize that it's one strategic sphere. Europe is more interested today in a free and Indo-Pacific than it ever has been. And because of the way the Prime Minister moved so quickly in condemnation of the war, Japan, ROK, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore have been very clear about what happens in Europe matters to them on a very personal national security basis. Now, I do think that what happened in Hong Kong is important to our shared values, meaning what you referred to in 2019. And it shouldn't have gone unspoken or unnoticed. While it was not, but I don't think it's contained to 2019. Hong Kong today is a shell of what it was before, not only population-wise, economically, politically. Because the future of Hong Kong fled Hong Kong. It's not what it was when China made a commitment that there be one country, two systems. They made that commitment to the UK and they violated it. I think the whole world is caught up to the fact that while China's an important country, the people of China have a lot of historic cultural value, economic value to contribute. But we're not going to be playing a fool anymore. In 2015, Japan was the first country to be victimized by China's economic coercion. But you were not the last. There was a boycott of Korea 2 years ago because Australia had the audacity to ask something about COVID. China used economic coercion to try to bust them. That's true about Lithuania. I can go down the list here. Every country's had a company who has been targeted by China's intellectual property theft and economic coercion and economic espionage. And I think the rest of the world has said is we will engage China economically, but we will not be played for a fool anymore. Now remember, President Xi looked President Obama in the eye and said we will never militarize the Spree Islands. That is exactly what they did. They looked the UK in the eye and said we'll have one system, one country, two systems, as it related to Hong Kong. They violated that. When the Philippines took China to the Maritime International Court, the court ruled in Philippines' favor and China ignored it. Now at some point, all of us have to say there's not one-offs here, but this is a pattern of behavior. And I think what you're witnessing across the world right now is we'll never be economically vulnerable or dependent on either Russia, China, or another autocracy. They're not good to their word. And until they are, you can put any charm offensive you want. But the countries in the, I think this is what President Biden says, we will not be dependent on China. We will not help prepare China for the future. We will engage economically and politically, but we won't play a sucker anymore. And that's what he's doing, and I'm for it. It's the right thing to do. You can't look, earlier there was a question about politics. You know why I was able to get 8 out of 8 years not losing? People knew they could trust me when I said X. If you look another world leader in the face and you say, we will never militarize these islands, and within 24 hours that's the first thing you're doing, your trust is violated. Your word is not worth squat anymore. Then you do it to the Philippines, then you do it to the UK, And you think I'm going to sit here at the table and have negotiations with you? You can't be trusted. You're not good to your word. You got a lot of smart people here in this row, all study diplomacy. Name me one person who's ever succeeded politically, internationally, whose word is not worth the paper it's written on. Doesn't happen. That's what is coming about as it relates to dealing. The president's been very firm about our policies in Taiwan. It's consistent. It's been true since the mid to late 70s. But you cannot violate it using force as it relates to dealing with Taiwan in that future, and more than just Taiwan, free and open Indo-Pacific.
Thank you very much. Next question. Okay, Mario.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Mario, and I'm a graduate student in the Global Governance Research Program, and I come from the Seychelles Islands. And my question is, well, related to my country's interest, of course. And it's related to maritime security, because we are located in the Indian Ocean part of the Indo-Pacific. And would like to get your thoughts on the U.S. foreign policy in that part of the world, because maritime, because it is really well, there is instability, especially in Yemen, Somalia, and this is a very crucial shipping route. And even in Mozambique as well, in the past few years, there has been some issues regarding terrorism. So, and we are in the middle of all that, and especially there is maritime crime, illegal drugs, human trafficking. There's a lot of things going on in that part of the world, and we have a huge ocean space to manage. So yeah, I would like to get your thoughts on U.S. foreign policy in that part of the world, and or maybe what the U.S. should be doing. Thank you. Oh, and I would like to say thank you to President Biden for rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, because our country heavily depends on that agreement. Thank you.
On the latter point, let me say that what was agreed to in Sharm el-Sheikh is a significant, well, it's a significant step forward. Now everybody has to execute towards those goals. And that also gets back to the question about cities. You're going to see, since cities are almost 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions, the reforms and changes cities make are going to be essential to that. The national government can set out outlines, could put certain policies in place, but the execution will happen at the local level. As it relates to the maritime, it's very much tied to the issues of a free and open Indo-Pacific. That no one of those, the independence or the free flow of goods and services, are ever challenged by a maritime power that's not interested in international rules. And so the United States will continue to be part of ensuring the free flow of goods and services through the Indian Ocean, South China Sea, etc. Okay? And not just try to do it alone, but with allies and friends of like-mindedness.
Thank you. Next question. I don't know. Well, whoever first.
My name is Christopher Kim, PhD candidate in Legal Research Department. Just one thing, I'm a graduate of a boot camp in the Great Lakes, and just, Mr. Ambassador, Chicago is way too humid and hot. Okay, so one question.
That's a funny thing to say from somebody from Tokyo, that we're too humid and hot. Just saying, I've been through your summers here. Chicago doesn't have anything on Tokyo. Okay?
Oh, actually, I'm an Alaskan, so that's probably why. There seems to be a dissonance between official U.S. policy and President Biden's statements in regards to Taiwan defense. Has the official U.S. policy changed? If not, how do we explain the difference? And would U.S. policy change if we see China like gathering its forces, kind of in a Ukraine case?
Well, I think the president, as recently as in his meeting with President Xi, reiterated what has been a standard of American policy: force cannot be used to change the status quo. That consistently has been and will continue to be the U.S. policy. And America stands ready, and I don't know if you saw this, but he didn't announce it at the time. But when he was meeting with President Xi, the United States sent a naval vessel through the states of Taiwan, showing our commitment to not only a free and open, but also that the Taiwan Straits, and more importantly Taiwan, will not be militarized by anybody.
Okay, then well, let's have it as the last question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador and Ichihara Sensei. My name is Nat and I'm from Thailand. As you mentioned earlier that United States and Japan were able to rally 8 over 10 ASEAN countries against Russia for condemnation against Russia. The sad thing is, I think Thailand was one of the 2 that did not commit to it. And Thailand
noticed.
Yeah, Thailand is one of the treaty allies of the United States. So my question is, how can the US and Japan work with countries that may not share the same democratic or values of freedom as the United States and Japan in combating the challenges we are facing today?
So let me back up and try to take up, because a number of questions, you're asked the questions about Thailand, you've asked. The reason the United States feels so important about, there's a couple reasons the United States feels very important about what Russia did in Ukraine. One is because it won't stop there if you don't stop it now. But second is, it's in direct violation of the United Nations that Russia's a signatory to, an original signatory. Now look, the United States has got buffered on 2 oceans. I suppose you could say that if we kept going, it could become a threat to us. It's not a threat to us. At one level, geographically. The United States is standing up for all the other countries in this region that could one day, if what Russia did to Ukraine becomes the norm and accepted, then it's the more vulnerable countries that will be vulnerable, not the United States. Now, we have a shared interest in collective defense. That is what NATO is about. It's collective defense. And the reason, after 50 years, Finland and Sweden decided to join NATO, having years said no, and we prefer independence, because they know they're more secure as countries in a system of collective defense than outside it. And the reason the United States has been so forceful at the United Nations in condemnation repeatedly of what Russia did is that if this becomes the norm, it's the countries, the smaller, more vulnerable countries of this region who will be on the serving platter of a China. That's why we have stood. Now, did Thailand not participate? No, it did not. Is it a treaty ally? Yes, it is. Does it mean you cut off all relations? No. It means you work with it towards the next time, because there's going to be another vote. And not only another vote, there's going to be another interest. There's going to be also another time in which Thailand is going to need the United States and Japan. That means you don't cut off conversation. You continue that dialogue, so when the time comes, Thailand sees that its self-interest is more with other like-minded countries in holding up a certain set of ideas, principles, and values, so they don't become either an economic or political victim to coercion. And that's what's at stake. And I want to be, can't answer your individual, it was a very good set of questions. Your question. We're not going to be a target. Probably one of the strongest armed forces in the world, protected by 2 oceans, one of the largest economies. It's to the more vulnerable, weaker, I don't mean weaker in a bad, pejorative sense, that we have taken this case to the United Nations, because if Russia's actions become the accepted norm, then no matter what you're studying in diplomacy, it won't matter. Because force equaling right will become the standard. And if you're willing to accept that, Raise your hand. And if you're not willing to accept it, then there's only one side of this ledger you can be on. Because if it becomes the accepted practice, China will see it as a green light to do not only what it wants in Taiwan, but what it tried to do to India just this year, what it tried to do to Philippines just the other day on its fishing rights and its oil. That will become the norm. And if you're willing to live with that, I can tell you where it leads. That's what's at stake. Does the United States believe Thailand should have been on a different side? Yes. Does that mean that you cut it off? No. Do you keep talking and keep trying to educate to get to a better place? Of course, because they are a treaty ally. Thank you.
Okay, well, Ambassador, for this is a really special occasion for us, for mostly two senses. One, no university professors will be able to cover such a diverse topic from international to national to local cities, and also from US to Europe to Asia. Well, that's one thing, the coverage. And also this passion and emotion that you put into what you say and in your engagement with students is spurred. Right, yeah. So, well, thank you so much for this very special occasion. Please give hands for the ambassador.